The moment I walked into Gregory Shaw's office, I knew something was off. He didn't meet my eyes. His leather chair creaked as he leaned back, fingers tented like he was about to deliver a TED Talk instead of wreck 5 years of my life. The morning sunlight cut across his desk, but his tone was anything but warm. "Lena," he began, "you're exceptional. No one's denying that. But when it comes to leadership, we need someone, more of a team player." I blinked slowly, trying to steady my breath. "Team player?" I repeated, my voice even. "Meaning what exactly?" He smiled, tight-lipped and rehearsed. "You're very focused, driven. But Haley brings energy to the office. She uplifts the team. You, on the other hand, are very results-oriented." Results-oriented. The words sliced through me like paper cuts. I had spent half a decade arriving before dawn, leaving long after dark. I'd landed the company's biggest client to date. I'd restructured our workflows and improved operational efficiency by 43%. And now that focus, the very thing that built this department, was being weaponized against me. Gregory continued speaking, but I'd stopped listening. My fingers curled tightly around the armrest of the chair, blood surging in my ears. I thought of every weekend I had canceled on friends, every birthday I'd skipped, every moment I'd sacrificed in the name of excellence. And for what? So a woman who spent her days gossiping by the coffee machine could get credit for positive energy. I should have screamed, cried, pleaded. Instead, I reached into my leather tote bag and pulled out a crisp white envelope. "I understand," I said quietly, placing it on the desk between us. "Thank you for letting me know." Gregory blinked. "What's this?" "My resignation letter," I said, standing. "Effective in 2 weeks." His face flickered. For the first time that morning, he looked surprised. "Lena, now hold on. Don't be hasty. Just because you didn't get this promotion doesn't mean it's not hasty." I interrupted, calm but final. "I've thought about it, and you're right. I am focused on results, which is exactly why I'm choosing to go somewhere that values them." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of that office with my head held high, even as my heart pounded. The hallway felt longer than usual. People looked up as I passed, their eyes curious, unsure. Whispers followed. No one said a word to my face, but I knew Haley would be smiling by lunch. What Gregory didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I hadn't spent the last 5 years building just this department. I'd been building something else, too. Something far more valuable than they could imagine. By the end of that day, the whole office knew. The energy shifted, subtle but unmistakable. Some avoided my gaze altogether. Others gave me a quick nod, like soldiers saluting a fallen general. And then there was Haley Monroe, now fluttering around like she'd just won Employee of the Century. "Emma, sorry. I mean Lena," she chirped as she perched herself on the edge of my desk the next morning. "I heard about everything. I just want you to know there are no hard feelings on my end." Her voice dripped with feigned sympathy. She even placed a manicured hand on my desk, as if trying to comfort me. "I know you really worked hard for that promotion. You were always diligent." I looked up from my computer, where I had been silently downloading and organizing copies of every document I'd ever created. I wasn't stealing. No, I had too much integrity for that. But I wasn't about to let 5 years of my intellectual labor vanish into the oblivion of corporate memory. "No hard feelings at all, Haley," I replied evenly. "I'm sure you'll do great." She beamed, mistaking my composure for surrender. Poor thing had no idea. No idea that while she'd spent the last 2 years angling for attention and repeating buzzwords in meetings, I'd been quietly designing something that actually worked. Something that would soon make her entire department obsolete. 3 years ago, I got tired of drowning in chaos. Tasks slipped through cracks, timelines were ignored, and decisions got lost in endless chains of reply-all emails. So I started building a project management tool. At first, it was for me just a digital structure to help keep things from spiraling. But it grew. I added metrics, then automation, then feedback loops. Over time, the tool began learning from itself, optimizing not just projects, but the humans behind them. It tracked efficiency, spotted patterns, preempted bottlenecks. I called it Pulse Board because it didn't just measure progress, it measured heartbeat. Without telling anyone, I started applying Pulse Board across our client accounts. I tested, tweaked, and adjusted in silence. The results spoke for themselves. Our turnaround time halved, client satisfaction soared, and Bright Peak's quarterly performance improved so dramatically that even Gregory had commented on it in one of his staff-wide memos, without knowing it was my doing. 6 months ago, I filed for a provisional patent. Last week, the approval came through. And that report? The one folded behind my resignation letter? It detailed exactly how much money Pulse Board had saved Bright Peak over the last 3 quarters. I even included year-on-year comparisons, client testimonials, and internal benchmarks. Everything they needed to realize just how badly they'd messed up. And still, none of them had read it. Gregory had simply seen the envelope and assumed it was just my formal goodbye. Haley probably hadn't even noticed there was anything more than a 2-paragraph resignation template inside. No one at Bright Peak really knew how to look beneath the surface. They valued performance in theory, but only if it came wrapped in the right personality. So I kept packing my digital bags. No drama, no confrontation, just careful, deliberate preparation. I knew exactly what was coming. I just didn't know it would come sooner than expected. It was late Thursday afternoon when the email arrived. The subject line was simple: coffee. The sender? David Langford. I froze. David Langford was the CEO of Naturatech Solutions, the clean tech powerhouse that had quietly snatched 3 of our potential clients over the past year. He was known for spotting innovation before anyone else did. The fact that he even knew my name was unexpected. His message was short, professional, but unmistakably direct. Hi, Lena. I heard you'll be wrapping up at Bright Peak soon. I'd love to grab coffee, my treat. Saturday afternoon work for you? Warmly, David. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the cursor blinking like it, too, was holding its breath. Then I smiled. Saturday, 1 p.m., Cafe Greenleaf, Capitol Hill. I arrived early. David was already there, reviewing something on a tablet. He looked up, smiled, and stood to shake my hand. Lena Park, he said, like he'd been waiting to say it for a while. I've been watching your work for over a year now. And let me just say, those efficiency improvements at Bright Peak? Masterful. I blinked. You knew those were me? He laughed gently. Bright Peak didn't, but we did. The conversation that followed felt surreal. He didn't waste time. He walked me through the vision of Naturatech, their challenges, scaling global operations, their need for someone who could bring coherence to chaos. And then he leaned forward slightly and said something I will never forget. We don't want to hire you as an employee, Lena. We want to bring you on as a partner, with creative authority over systems design. Full implementation rights across departments. And he smiled. Equity. For a second, the world seemed to go silent. Your system, he continued, whatever you're calling it, Pulse Board, we want to roll it out across our entire infrastructure. We've been waiting for the right person to lead that transformation. And we think it's you. I stared at the contract he slid across the table. The base salary alone was 3 times what I made at Bright Peak. Add the equity, the leadership role, the freedom. It wasn't just a job. It was a platform. I didn't hesitate. I'm in, I said, my voice steady, even as my heart thundered in my chest. David nodded, satisfied. Welcome to Naturatech, Lena. You're going to change the way we work. As I walked out of the cafe, contract in hand, I passed a group of Bright Peak employees seated near the window. They didn't notice me. Why would they? But soon they would. The morning of my last day, I arrived early, just like always. The office was quiet the way I liked it. Peaceful, efficient, everything in order. I was transferring the last few files to HR when the message popped up on my screen. Gregory Shaw would like to see you. Now. I didn't rush. I logged out, closed my laptop, adjusted the sleeves of my blazer. Then I walked to his office like it was any other meeting. Gregory was pacing when I arrived, his usual smug composure replaced by something brittle, uncertain. He looked up, eyes wide. Lena, we need to talk. I stepped inside. About what? He held up a stack of papers, the report. My report. The one tucked neatly behind my resignation letter, now covered in his scribbles, highlighter marks, and panic. Why didn't you tell us about this system before? He asked, almost breathless. This pulse board thing, it's brilliant. Do you know how much we could have saved? How much we already saved using this without even realizing it? I sat down slowly, smoothing my skirt. I did try to tell you. 3 times, actually. I requested meetings, submitted proposals. You said we needed to prioritize team dynamics. That our department didn't need another tool. It needed more social cohesion. His face paled. I don't remember that. No, I said softly. You wouldn't, because people like Haley made you feel seen, heard, important. I made you feel challenged. He flipped through the pages again, his fingers trembling. But this, you've patented it. I have, I said calmly. Approved last week. The system, the architecture, the algorithms, it's all protected. Legally mine. Gregory collapsed into his chair, the full weight of his mistake pressing down like gravity. Lena, come on. Don't do this. We'll match whatever offer you got. Triple your current salary. Promote you to senior director. Just don't go to Natura Tech? I finished for him. Too late. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. They offered me partnership, I added, and respect. Something this place hasn't given me in a very long time. There was a long silence. Outside, the office had begun to buzz with the usual 9 a.m. hum, but in here it was dead still. Finally, Gregory leaned forward, voice low, desperate. You were right, Lena. About the system. About everything. I was wrong. But we can still fix this. I stood, straightened my jacket. No, Gregory, you can't fix this. Because what's broken isn't just a promotion. It's the culture, the way you measure value. You promoted Haley because she smiled in meetings. I built the very foundation of your department, and you didn't even bother to read my resignation letter until today. He looked like he might cry, or scream, or both. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. You know what the funny thing is, I said, not bothering to look back. If you'd paid half as much attention to results as you did to who laughed at your jokes, none of this would be happening. And with that, I walked out for the very last time. 3 months passed, 3 months of silence, and then the storm hit. I was in the middle of a leadership meeting at Natura Tech, walking my team through PulseBoard's next system-wide update, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from David Whitaker, a former colleague from Bright Peak. Check the industry news. Something big just dropped about Bright Peak. I excused myself quietly, stepped into my office, and pulled up the news feed. The headline made me stop breathing. Bright Peak Collective in crisis. Shares plummet after client exodus. My eyes skimmed the article in a rush. 3 major clients had terminated contracts in the same quarter. A 4th had issued a public statement criticizing the firm's sudden decline in reliability. Project timelines had collapsed. Budgets were spiraling out of control. The company's stock had dropped by 29% in 1 week. I kept reading until one quote stopped me cold. The structure we relied on for years has disappeared, said Thomas Brooks, CEO of one of their largest former clients. Deadlines are being missed. Projects, once completed with military precision, are now tangled in confusion. It's like they lost their backbone overnight. I smiled, not out of malice, but recognition. They had. They lost their backbone when they lost me. Another message came through. David, Haley's melting down. She can't manage the team. Gregory's in panic mode. They don't know what they're doing. I set my phone down slowly, the weight of it finally lifting off my chest. The irony was almost too rich. Haley, who once perched on my desk offering hollow condolences, now buried under real responsibility she never earned. Gregory, who tossed aside substance for showmanship, now grasping at smoke. Meanwhile, here at Natura Tech, things were different. Pulse Board wasn't just working, it was transforming. Our project completion rates had doubled. Client satisfaction was the highest in the company's history. We had just signed a 5-year licensing deal with a Fortune 100 firm to deploy my system across their global branches. And more importantly, I was finally being seen. Every meeting I led, every metric I improved, every success we celebrated, my name was on it. No one took credit for my work. No one told me I was too focused on results. Here, results were everything. I glanced at the framed certificate behind my desk. Patent number 1084-77, B Pulse Board System. Next to it, a plaque from the executive board, in recognition of record-breaking Q2 performance under the leadership of Lena Park. And yet, it wasn't about the trophies. It was about finally being valued, not for how I smiled or who I impressed, but for what I built. Bright Peak had made their choice. They chose charisma over competence, noise over value, and now they were paying the price, exactly as I knew they would. 6 months after I walked out of Bright Peak for the last time, I arrived at my office to find David Langford already there, leaning casually against the windowsill with a newspaper folded under his arm. "Morning," he said, holding it up. "Have you seen this?" The front page headline read, "Bright Peak CEO resigns amid restructuring chaos." I took the paper from him, already knowing what I'd find. Gregory Shaw had stepped down, or rather been pushed out. The board had launched an internal investigation into months of mismanagement, lost clients, and internal inefficiencies. They'd attempted to recreate my system, even hired consultants to reverse engineer PulseBoard's logic, but it never worked. Of course it didn't. They thought PulseBoard was just code and spreadsheets. They didn't understand that what made it powerful wasn't just the software. It was the thinking behind it, the human patterns, the way trust flowed or didn't, the silent variables no one thought to measure. David chuckled softly. Apparently, the new interim board is trying to license PulseBoard now. I raised an eyebrow. "You're joking." "Nope. Their legal team contacted ours last week. The same firm that dismissed your proposal now wants to pay 7 figures just to rent it." I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. Then I laughed. Not the bitter kind, not even triumphant, just free, because it wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about Gregory, or Haley, or Bright Peak. It was about finally being in a place where my ideas weren't just tolerated, they were celebrated. Later that afternoon, I received an email. It was from Gregory. Subject: "No subject. Hi Lena, I hope you're doing well. I'm sure you've seen the news. I wanted to write and say, I was wrong about everything. You were the foundation of our success, and I didn't realize it until it was gone. The system you built was light years ahead of anything we understood. I should have seen it. I should have listened. Before I left, I told the board that letting you go was the biggest mistake we made. I know it's too late, but I wanted you to hear it from me. Jessica resigned last month. Turns out running a team is harder than smiling in meetings. Anyway, I just wanted to say you were right. Results do matter. Wishing you all the best. Gregory the first, read it once. Then again. And for a brief moment, I felt something like closure. There was a time when an email like that would have meant everything to me, when I would have printed it out and pinned it to my wall like a trophy. But not anymore. Now, it was just a footnote in a story that had already moved on. I hit reply. Gregory, thank you for your message. You're right, results do matter. I wish you well in whatever comes next. Best, Lena, and that was it. No bitterness. No, I told you so. Just a quiet, full stop on a chapter that never deserved more. As I closed my laptop, I glanced once more at the framed certificate on the wall, my patent, and beneath it a new plaque. Lena Park Executive Vice President, Operations and Strategic Innovation. This was mine. Not given. Not gifted. Earned. The next morning, I called for a team meeting. The room filled quickly. Faces I'd come to respect, voices I now led, people who valued excellence not because it was flashy, but because it mattered. I stood at the head of the table, hand steady, voice calm. Before we start, I said, I want to tell you a story. They listened. I told them, not in bitterness, not in blame, but in truth, about the place I left, about the moments I was overlooked, silenced, and told that being effective wasn't enough, about what it means to be quietly competent in a world that rewards performance over substance, and then about how the same qualities that once made me invisible had become the reason I was standing here. They leaned in, they nodded, some even smiled, because they understood. It wasn't just a story about a promotion denied. It was a story about value, how easily it's misjudged, how dangerously it's overlooked, and how powerful it becomes when finally recognized. I ended the meeting not with a cheer, but with a promise. That's the culture we're building here, I said. One where results speak louder than politics, where your worth isn't measured by how loudly you speak, but by the impact you leave behind. Afterward, I walked back to my office in silence. Outside the window, Seattle's sky had just begun to clear, the clouds parting over the skyline like something shifting inside me too. As I sat down, my phone buzzed again. Another message from David Whitaker. Bright Peak's board is asking if you'd ever consider returning as CEO. I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, Thanks, but I'm exactly where I need to be. And I was. Because true success isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. It's knowing your worth without needing it stamped by people who never saw you to begin with. It's building something better, not just for revenge, but for those who come after you. For the next Lena, still sitting in a gray cubicle somewhere, doubting herself because someone said she was too quiet, too serious, too focused on results. To her, I say this: don't change, don't shrink, don't water yourself down to fit a mold built for mediocrity. Because one day, someone will walk into your office, offer you a seat at the table you built, and call you by the title you earned, not because of who you charmed, but because of what you delivered. And when that day comes, smile, because they finally saw what they missed.